Hoy tenemos el gusto de conversar con Jack Sholder, director, guionista y editor estadounidense, reconocido por su trabajo dentro del cine de terror y ciencia ficción de los años 80. Es recordado especialmente por haber dirigido Pesadilla en la calle del infierno 2, la icónica secuela de las películas de Freddy Krueger, así como por la aclamada película de ciencia ficción Lo Oculto. Además, dirigió Solos en la Oscuridad, considerada una de las primeras producciones de la legendaria compañía New Line Cinema. A lo largo de su carrera, Sholder se ha distinguido por su capacidad para combinar el suspenso, la acción y una profunda exploración del miedo humano y la pérdida de control, dejando una huella duradera en el cine de género contemporáneo. Bienvenido, welcome, Mr. Jack Sholder.
Muchas gracias, estar aquí.
Very good, Jack. Thank you. And we always appreciate when people speak local language and but it's what a great honor to have you here, Jack. Great to meet you, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's a pleasure. I mean, I do a lot of these interviews, it seems, but when you said that this was from Mexico, I love Mexico. You know, I've been going there for a few years, and it's a great country, great people, great food.
Great food. We
And
agree.
I see, like, Mexico City is like number one city in the world now. Or anyway,
it's a crazy adventure. Absolutely, it's like a country within a country almost. It's a
yeah.
great
I
place.
mean, it's a complicated place, but incredible history. I mean, Mexico City. Someone said after Paris has more art museums than any city in the world.
That is true.
Mm.
That is true.
Yeah.
But we must not forget that it's also a humongous city. So it's
Yes.
there's space for
I
everything.
know we took a trip out to see the ruins, you know, and the driver said, "You see that neighborhood up there on those mountains?" He said, "No, not the police will go in there. The police go in there and come out without their car and their clothes and their gun and everything." So
that is it.
We stuck to Roma, you know.
Good. Yeah, it's a great place, and very glad to know that you know it. So, without further ado, let's go with the first question. And this is a little bit philosophical and a personal question, but I wanted to ask you why you are who you are.
Well, I'm 80 years old at this point. It's hard for me to kind of fathom that. But so 80 years, or 78 years of experiencing life. But I don't know. I've always been a little bit of an oddball. Like, I think a lot of creative people tend to not fit in when they're young.
Yes.
I always saw things in a very wry manner. I have a great sense of irony. One of the things that I regret is that I never got to do a full-on comedy. Although a lot of my movies have a lot of comedy elements, but I studied to be a musician. I was going to be a classical trumpet player when I was in high school and younger, and I played the trumpet sort of semi-professionally.
Wow.
For most of my life. I even played the trumpet on a couple of soundtracks of my movies.
Wow.
And then I wanted to be a writer, so I majored in English literature, and so I've read all of the great works of literature. A friend of mine, a writer friend, said there are two kinds of writers: those who have read Shakespeare and those who have not. And I've read everything that Shakespeare wrote, including some things that he may or may not have written. But so I have that kind of grounding, and I think that film is really music and story. And when I say music, I don't mean literally music. I mean it works like music.
True.
It has a structure, a macro structure, and it has a micro structure. Cut to cut, beat to beat, measure to measure. and there's nothing in the world that resembles music. You can't go outside into a forest and hear a Beethoven symphony from the birds. It's completely unnatural in a sense, but yet it has this ability to affect us emotionally. I mean, not everybody likes classical music or salsa or soul or country, but everybody loves some kind of music, and it gets to them. And film works in that way also. And a lot of it has to do with editing.
Yeah, that is
Because
right.
editing there's a rhythm in there that pulls you along that you're not aware. People say, "Oh, the cinematography is so beautiful." If the editing is really flashy, then they say, "Oh, the editing's good." But editing can be a lot more subtle than that. But it has an enormous impact on just your emotions, the way your heart is beating. In a suspense sequence, it's not just the music, but it's the way things are cut.
That's a great point. And I think editors are given too little credit very often. I mean, there's so many movies that have been saved by the editor, starting from Star Wars. There's so many examples of editors doing an amazing job. I think they should be given much more credit than they get today.
Yeah, and actually, after I graduated from university, where I made some films on my own. I mean, there was no film program. I never took a single course in filmmaking. Everything I learned, I sort of figured out on my own. Then I moved to New York and I started to get some work as a film editor. And so, and I was ideally suited actually to be an editor because I have that musical background and I have the story background, and that's really what editing is.
That makes total sense.
Almost all the good editors that I know have musical background. A lot of them are, play an instrument, and a few that don't have a great appreciation of music. And there are a few who don't, then they're not, to my mind, there's something a little off. Off the beat.
As artists often tend to be, but yeah, that's a very interesting point of combining editing with music. I haven't thought of that, but you're totally right that it requires that sort of sense of rhythm and keeping up and switching and changing. I love that anecdote, so thank you for sharing that.
Also structure.
Yeah,
music is structure. I mean, if you listen to classical music, the structure is very, poetry.
Sure.
A sonnet has, it's 14 lines and it's supposed to rhyme, and it's, iambic pentameter, and they're, and if you listen to, any symphony from the classical period, they all have a minuet, and the minuet is exactly the same number of bars, and it's exactly the same, but when you listen to a minuet written by, Mr. Jones, and then you listen to a minuet written by Mozart, same exact form. Big difference.
Yeah, big difference. Exactly. Yes.
It's like, Jaws and Jaws 2.
Yeah, let's not even go there.
Not that Jaws 2 is a bad movie, but
there is a big difference. Absolutely. But speaking of second parts, let me go to the second question. I mean, we know that there's a new recent version of the restored 4K version of Freddy's Revenge, and I wanted to ask you that when I assume you saw it, and when you did you feel that you almost like had a re-encounter with some part of yourself? Like, I wanted to ask you, how did it feel to see it after so many years, and was there some visual detail or atmospheric detail that you truly found different in this new version?
Well, I did supervise the restoration, so they actually, with this new restored version, Warner Brothers went back to the original camera negative.
Oh wow!
They had none of the previous, the DVD or the 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 VHS, or a print that you see in the theater. Print that you see in the theater is not made from the original negative. You don't you take that original negative and you make what's called an interpositive, or maybe two, and then you use the interpositive to make a new internegative.
Okay.
So if something happens to it, you can just make another one. If something happens to the original negative, that's it. But they went back to the original negative and scanned that into 4K. And I actually asked them, I said, how come you didn't scan it into 6K or 8K, for the future? And they said, well, we did a test. We did scan a piece of it into 8K, and you couldn't get any more information in the 8K than you had in the 4K.
Interesting.
I mean, 4K, resolves the grain.
Sure.
So it looks great. I mean, I didn't have to do very much with that. I mean, there were a few places where, with when we made the film, you could basically change the overall color of a shot, or the exposure, make it lighter or darker, or make it a little greener or bluer, but you couldn't go in and make somebody's eyes more blue or make the sky more yellow, and with these digital tools you can do anything.
True.
And so we did a few enhancements, but mostly what there was one scene, an exterior night shot, and I wanted to make it darker.
Okay.
Because it felt a little too bright to me. And the person from Warner Bros. Said, don't do that. Leave it the way it was, because that, and I, the fans wanted to see the way it was. And that was the way we wanted it when, in 1984, when we shot it. And so I agreed that, if we were, if we were shooting the film today, it would look differently, because styles change.
Of
a
course.
Song from 1980 sounds different from a song from 2025.
True.
So, but the real revelation for me was the sound.
Okay.
Because we originally mixed the film in mono, because New Line was a small company. They didn't have a lot of money, and it cost extra to do stereo, so they didn't want to pay for stereo. So all we had was a mono track. Now the mono track, and also the track goes to an optical soundtrack, which runs along the edge of the 35 millimeter film, and you can get amazingly good sound, but there are limits. You can only go so loud, or it starts to break up.
Of course.
And when you mix it to three what are called stems. So there's one stem that's all the dialogue, that's mixed and equalized and everything else. And then there's one that's all of these sound effects combined and mixed, so some are louder, some are lower. And then there's a third one that has the music on it. And again, the music is mixed. It's not a straight level. It goes up and down depending on, what else is happening. And so when you're mixing it, I want to make that sound louder. Well, you can't make it louder because it's going to go, the needle's going to go, too far, and it's going to break up. It's not going to, so you can't make this louder, but you could make the other thing lower, and then this would sound louder.
Oh, wow.
But
Cool.
with Dolby Atmos, so what they did was, for foreign versions, they have to deliver what's called a music and effects track.
Okay.
So it basically, if they're going to dub the film into Spanish, the studio has to provide a track that has all the sound except for the voices. So
Sure.
they have to go in. It's not just like the car sound or the doors shutting. It's like clothing rustle. There's all these subtle little things that are in the sound that you don't even know about, but that make it feel real. If those are gone, then it feels fake. But if you do all of these tiny little, and so they went through and they redid all of the effects.
Oh, wow.
Well, they didn't redo, but they made a whole new track with all new effects that matched the effects that were in the original. So, the sound of Freddy's claws going across the metal, they matched that sound. But so what it meant was that when we went back to do the sound, if I wanted to make the sound of Freddy's claws louder, I couldn't do it because it was all mixed in. Everything else would get louder. But here I could just grab that sound and bring that one sound up. Plus, in Dolby Atmos, you can, with the optical track, what would happen is that everything would be mushed together. So so you had to be careful because sometimes if the music just went a little too loud, you couldn't quite understand the dialogue, or if
Sure.
and to get that balance right. But here you could hear everything distinctly. You could hear the music clearly, but you could also hear all the dialogue clearly. And if I wanted something louder, nobody said you can't make it louder. You could do whatever the whole new digital world is pretty incredible. So in a sense, so I heard things in the music track that I had, there was one place where I heard a gong, and I thought, oh, I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, I didn't direct that. Yeah.
Because it got a little bit lost, but so the sound is really pretty incredible, and it lifts the whole film. I mean, sound is very, very important. There's a sequence where I'm assuming that you've seen the movie, maybe, but the scene where the parakeet goes and attacks the family, and it was, how do you make that any good? It's kind of silly. But when we had in Dolby Atmos, it suddenly was like The Birds. It was like Hitchcock's The Birds. It was, the scene was like really good, and I couldn't believe it. And I said, wait a second, stop. And they had the original track, the original mix track on one of their tracks so that they could use it as a reference. I said, play it back with the original track. And with the original track, it was, and then the new track was like, oh, wow. So, so in a sense, I kind of thought of it as like like when they have a Renaissance painting and they restore it and they take all the yellow lacquer off, and you suddenly, oh my God, that purple, that color is so unbelievable. We've never seen that before. And we never saw, gee, there's a little cat looking out from behind the chair that we could never see, And so so it's the same, but it's the way we wanted it to look when we shot it.
Oh, that's amazing.
But it never looked, if you saw it in a theater, which is the best way to see it, it still never looked or sounded that way. And now it does. I mean, when I was in the mixing studio, it sounds really good. It never will sound that good anywhere else. But with Dolby Atmos, if they have that system, it should sound pretty much, maybe not quite as good as the Warner Brothers mixing studio, but it's going to sound pretty damn good. And and it's not a personal film for me.
Okay.
I mean, I got hired. Wes Craven was supposed to direct it, and then he decided not to 6 weeks before they were going to start shooting. So I came in, and I had to get it done. I didn't have much time for any input in the script. The script, it's just, how am I going to get this onto film and make it good? And so
and good you did, sir. Good you did.
And so it wasn't as personal a film for me as some of my others, but when I looked at it, I said, this is a really good film, and it's and you did a really good job,
Well done. And
was very pleasing.
I love the fact, Jack, that you sort of have that connection of, hey, wait a second, I want to see this old scene with the old sound, and then you realize that there's a huge change. And I think that's beautiful. It shows your craftsmanship and artistry of realizing those differences. And it's as you say, it seems subtle, but it has a humongous impact on the movie experience in total. So that is very good to know. Thank you for that, and we will be listening to it again. How about that, Luis? Now we're going to go listen to the movie. I love it. Thank you for that. So
you can now buy the 7 CD set is out now. So all 7 movies have been restored. A few people have said that they felt that mine sort of looked the best. I have, because I was an editor, I have a lot of experience in post-production. I've spent months, if not years of my life in mixing studios. So I really understand how all that works and how color works and all that. So I think it came out really, really well, and it's now available. If anybody has a 4K system and likes, you should definitely get it. It's really, I mean, it's the same, but a lot better.
Wow. And most people consider Freddy's Revenge to be the most, psychological or symbolic of all the series. So I think with the upgrades, it's going to be a great watch for everybody. So we will receive your recommendation. Jack, let me ask you about this, because the whole Nightmare on Elm Street saga was very popular in Mexico in the early 80s, and including Freddy's Revenge. And there were these movies were recurrently shown on open TV, and we, even myself, grew up watching them on national TV here in Mexico. And we were terrorized. We were young people, and we got the experience of fear that we shared nationwide. And so my question to you is were you at that stage in life, were you conscious that you were actually causing this massive connection and fear to audiences also outside of the United States? And that did you have any idea that it would resonate so much with, let's say, Mexicans, because this repression and identity topics and themes, they're very complex and maybe aimed for a specific public originally, but they resonated so well over here too. Did you ever have conscience of that?
Well, there's a complicated answer to that. So my first film, Alone in the Dark, is, I mean, people call it a slasher film. I don't like to call it a slasher film, but it fits within the genre. But
okay,
I never really wanted to make horror films. I certainly never wanted to make a slasher film. I don't like films that have gratuitous cruelty in them. But I had a chance to finally direct my first feature, which was my goal.
Yeah.
I mean, the editing was my day job, and what I was trying to do was to direct my feature, and I had made some shorts that won awards and things like that. So that was the price to make my art film, was to make it in the form of a slasher film. But if you've seen the film, it's about a lot more than just people getting killed. It's
True.
It's kind of a social critique, which when I look back on my films, all of my best films seem to be kind of social critique. I mean, The Hidden is very much a social critique, so after my first feature was done, I think the first thing that happened was I got invited to the Sitges Film Festival, outside of Barcelona, where it was shown, and the audiences really responded. But that was my first real experience of interacting with an international audience.
Okay.
So and horror is a genre that goes across different cultures.
True.
I mean, I think some of the best horror films being made now are made in Korea. The Korean films are unbelievable, and they cross. It's a very different culture from our culture, but all of the unspoken concepts in the culture, a lot of them are very different from ours. I was involved with getting a studio built in China.
Okay.
And it was like they not only had to interpret what the people were saying in Chinese, but what they were saying meant something different than we thought they were saying. They say yes, but yes doesn't necessarily mean yes. And there are all of these, but horror crosses all of these boundaries. I mean, comedy doesn't cross as well because, you know, comedy is like, I mean, when I see some of these Mexican comedy shows, they're really very, very silly, you know, and very broad. And it's not the kind of humor, you know, if you look at Canadian humor is very dry, you know.
Yeah. Or the British even more so. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I understand how that works. I mean, when I was my goal, the reason I wanted to make movies was because I would see movies that I loved and I would walk out of the theater feeling different, you know, than I felt when I walked in. You know,
That's
they
great.
moved me emotionally, you know, they had a real effect on me. And I thought, you know, if I can do that and make a movie that has that effect on an audience, that's, you know, for me that's the best thing. And
That's
so
great.
I mean, I think fear is a lower emotion, you know. I think, you know, introspection, sorrow, those are higher, you know, things. It's easy just to scare somebody. You know, you can sneak up on them and go, boo, you know, and they jump, you know. It's the stupid, you know, like these stupid things where the cat suddenly jumps into the frame, you know. I mean, you know, that's like the lowest form of movie making.
Yeah. And
But
human behavior. And human behavior. Yeah.
but I've had a chance to go. You know, people invite me to screenings, so I see these films with different audiences, and you know, and even in America, you know, the audience in New York is different from the audience in Omaha.
Of course.
You know? But you can see, you know, common responses. And you know, sometimes I go to conventions, and I meet people, you know, and they have similar stories about, you know, how the movie affected them and what it meant to them. I mean, one guy said, he came up to me and he said, your movie saved my life. And well, I mean, that movie, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, but he said, you know, Elm Street 2 saved my life. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I had cancer and I was getting chemotherapy and it was horrible. And I was just suffering. And I thought, you know, what can I do to just make myself feel better? And he said, you know, I really love your movie. So I kept watching it over and over. And it got me through it. I said, you know, that's the best review I've ever got.
Oh, wow. Wow. That is beautiful. Congratulations. Because, yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, movies help, music helps, everything helps, and it inspires us greatly. And they even, you know, movies like yours have the tendency, at least did back in the 80s, to dominate the whole culture, pop culture scene, and you know, generate a real impact. And now that you mentioned the scary cat jumping, I wanted to ask you, do you think that the, you know, modern terror, like what we see in the movies today or the series, does it scare us most because of the sort of obvious jump scares, or is it more because our social anxieties have multiplied due to, you know, ongoing anxiety and wars and political instability? Do you think what is the real reason behind modern scare or modern
Well,
fear?
well, I mean, the genre is an easy genre to make. You know, I mean, horror films have always been like cheap movies to make, and if they hit, they make a lot of money. And even if they don't hit, because they're so cheap to make, you know, you don't need a big movie star.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need. You know, it's not like a Marvel comic book movie where you spend $200 million, which means you have to make at least $400 million to even break even. You know,
Yeah.
if you make a horror film, I mean, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street cost about $1 million to. No, it was about $2 million to make.
Okay.
You know, at this point, I don't know. It's made, I don't know, a lot more.
Yes.
You know, I get a nice check every year. You know, so it keeps obviously it keeps making money. People keep buying it and going to see it. Um, but there are some great movies made. I mean, a good movie, a good work of art has ambiguity. It has layers. It doesn't just mean one thing. I mean, we all know there's this queer interpretation of Elm Street too, you know, and which never occurred to us when we were making it. I mean, we knew that there were these gay elements in there, you know, because it's this kid who has teen sexual anxiety, you know, and he's a sissy, you know, so people call him gay because, which doesn't really mean that you're gay, but it's a slur. I mean, but I mean, it's subject to different interpretations. So, for instance, you know, in the mid '80s, you know, there was the AIDS crisis.
Of
So a
course.
lot of things became metaphors for AIDS, and I know that was a little bit in the writer's mind, you know, which is probably why he brought some of those elements in. You know, films that were made in the 50s and 60s, you know, there was the idea of nuclear annihilation, you know, and that
Yes.
became a theme.
Yes.
You know, now, I mean, you know, I don't know what's the world seems so screwed up right now.
We'll try to, yes. Let's not film it too much. We don't want to remember it all, but I think, you know, as you said, I think you have really managed well in your movies to bring out this very human side to identity and fear, and I really appreciate that. Even when you combine all these different gender like terror or science fiction, and also, but tell us, Jack, what are you creating right now?
Actually, I had a vampire movie that I worked on with a writer friend of mine. We almost got it made, and then the whole thing unfortunately fell apart. You know, but again, it was really a lot about female empowerment, about the negative effects of fundamentalist religion. You know, it was about a lot of other things, and I'm not sure that it's ever going to get made. You know, I hope so. You know, I would love to do another movie. I actually, you know, if you're a painter or you're a novelist or something, you know, you can still do it.
Sure.
I mean, there's this. I don't know whether you've heard of Margaret Price. So she was a black woman who was a composer, and she was active in the 30s and the 40s. She wrote her first symphony, and it won some national award, and it was performed by the Chicago Symphony, which is one of the great orchestras in America. Oh, wow. And she wrote a total of 4 symphonies. Only the first one was, the other 3 were never performed in her lifetime. She wrote all this music. Somebody bought this house near Chicago, which had belonged to her at one time. And they were going through in the attic, they find these stacks of music. And they start listening to them and say, hey, this woman was a genius.
Oh, wow.
And now there's all these recordings and orchestras all over the world. But she wrote, I mean, to write a symphony is not easy. It's a
not
big
easy
deal.
at all. Yeah.
So she wrote 3 more symphonies that never got performed. She didn't get a commission, or she just was able to do it. If I want to make 3 more movies, I've got to get like millions of dollars. You know,
True.
I need,
yeah.
you know, 50 people or 100 people to, or well, nowadays maybe 20, but I don't know.
I know. It's
I mean,
harder every day. Yes.
I can't just do that because I need all of these other things. So I actually thought to myself, you know, there's this interesting kind of autobiographical story that I think would be interesting, and so I actually wrote it up. I just you know, it'd been sort of in my mind, and I just wrote it, and I thought, well, hey, I can write something, you know.
Well, let's hope it comes to fruition. We would love to see that vampire movie or any other things you come up with, Jack. That would be an honor. And Luis, do you have one good question for our guest?
Así es, ahorita le traducimos. Gracias, Jack, por compartirnos tu tiempo y reflexiones. Vamos a hacer un par de preguntas rápidas. Por favor, contéstala con lo primero que se venga en mente.
So he's gonna do a couple of quick questions. Just answer very shortly, 1 or 2 words.
Okay.
¿Qué ves o lees en tu tiempo libre?
What do you read or watch on your free time?
I'm watching a lot of streaming television now,
Cool.
which I think is there's an incredibly good stuff that's on. I mean, Succession. I'm watching The Pit right now. It's terrific.
Oh, wow.
Great stuff.
Good. Thank you. Go ahead, Luis.
Y bueno, si Freddy Krueger entrara en el mundo de hoy, ¿a qué temores modernos se enfrentaría?
If Freddy Krueger would appear in today's world, what modern challenges would he face? Where to
Probably
start?
the same ones he faced in the 80s. I mean, people still dream at night, so that hasn't changed.
Unless they're staring at their phones all night. Yeah.
Y por último, una pregunta de nuestra audiencia, Janet Garza de los libros de Jan, nos dice, ¿qué hace que Freddy, 40 años después, siga tan presente y sea imposible de olvidar?
And this is from one of our listeners, a question of how is it possible, Jack, that even after 40 years, Freddy Krueger is so impossible to ignore and forget, and it's still so much present in our pop culture?
Because he's a great character, played by a great actor. And I don't think that's 40 years is nothing. I mean, people are still talking about Ulysses, 3,000 years later.
And reading Shakespeare. Yes.
500 years later.
True. Very good. Excellent.
Okay.
So very good. With that note, Jack, we would like to thank you so much for your time, valuable time, and for your very interesting comments. Thank you so much on my behalf, and great to meet you.
Gracias, Jack, por esta charla y por recordarnos que el verdadero terror no siempre está en la pantalla, sino en lo que despierta dentro de nosotros. Ha sido un placer tenerte aquí.
Es un placer.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
A ustedes.